Welcome to the next podcast from the Pakistan American Foundation. Hosted by Amber Chaudhry, APF's Cultural and Heritage Team Lead, this podcast offers an insight into the power of storytelling and community. Amber's own experience as a Chief Experience Officer in the US federal government, a nonprofit co founder, and now CEO of Strat Advisors uniquely equips her for guiding us through today's conversation. Our guest today is Salma Hasan Ali, who came to America from Pakistan when she was 7 years old. She has built a community by sharing her past and present experiences via storytelling and is currently the principal at SHA Storytelling Consulting. Amber, over to you.
Thank you, Mustafa, and thank you, Salma, so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you today because I know that you have such a unique way of telling stories. And just want to start off really quickly with, can you tell us a little bit more about, your journey into storytelling and how you got started?
Sure. So my background is actually in political science and international relations. I have a undergrad degree from Columbia and poli-sci, went to SIPA, the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia for international studies. And then my early career was with international organizations, doing a lot of writing and editing and communications work, but on issues and for organizations and writing the ideas of other people. I never thought about my own story or writing it down or thinking that anybody would be interested in it. But when I lived in Europe for a while, worked in Stockholm and Paris and Geneva, when we moved back to the US, I took a break from my professional life to raise my two kids. And that was a moment when I decided I really want to understand for myself and for my children what our story is, and specifically our immigration story coming to America from Pakistan. What was that like? What was that experience like? I wanted to really understand for myself and my children what our experience was like coming to America from Pakistan. I wanted them to understand their roots, their heritage, their foundation, and I wanted to know the specifics of my own story. So when my parents were visiting, I sat them down and I asked them the story of how we came to this country, what that was like for them, and what were some of the challenges and their experiences. And I knew that I wouldn't necessarily write my story unless I had a reason to do so. Often we don't just sit down at the computer and say, okay, today I'm going to write my personal story, right? So I wanted an assignment and a deadline and some sense of accountability. So I just signed up for a writing class in my town, even though my background is in writing and in communications. I wanted the discipline of having the time and the space to write this personal story. I interviewed my parents, and they shared stories that I'd never heard before. Um, for example, when we first arrived in America, we were in Chicago for a few months, and then we moved to New York City. So it was myself, I was 7, my older brother was 9, my mom and dad, a couple of suitcases, and just pinned our hope on a short consulting contract that my father had as an engineer in a company in New York. And as he told me the story, we pulled up. It was at JFK, a cab pulled up. He tossed our suitcases in the trunk and he turns to my father and says, "Where would you like to go?" And my father said, "We've just arrived here. We have no family, no friends in New York. Take us to a neighborhood that you think would be suitable." Imagine our fate in the hands of this random cab driver who decided, shrugged his shoulders and took us to Queens. He figured it's an immigrant community, we'll fit right in. And so began life in America for us. So I wrote this story down, all the details and the nuances and sort of my experiences growing up, how difficult it was, how I was bullied, I didn't speak the language, just the culture shock, I dressed oddly, all of that. And I shared it with my classmates for this class that I was taking. And then I read it to my parents. And my father, in particular, had the reaction I was hoping for, which was tears in his eyes. To hear his story, their story, retold by their daughter, it just made it all worth it, right? The sacrifices, the challenges, all the things that they went through. He just realized at that moment that I got it, I appreciated it, and that, we're well settled here and doing well. And he felt really proud to hear that. And that evening, I read it to my kids. They were young at the time, and my daughter in particular was amazed to know that her experience is so different from mine. She was born in Switzerland. She, grew up speaking English, was part of the culture in Europe and in America. And it was really amazing for her to know her mom in that light. So that was the purpose of the story. It had served its function, and I tucked it away. I had no intention of sharing it or publishing it. I mean, it never crossed my mind until I met a friend who was a writer. And I thought, I'd like to get into writing as well. And she said, send me something you've written so I get an idea of your style. I had just finished this piece. So I sent it to her. And she said, it sounds really interesting. Send it to the Washingtonian. The Washingtonian, uh, as you know, is a pretty big deal magazine in the DC area. It's not one in which personal essays, certainly of a Pakistani American, are often featured, or perhaps at all. So I thought, why in the world would they be interested in this ordinary story? But I figured I have nothing to lose. I wrote a few thousand words for this class. I sent it to an editor at the Washingtonian. I thought, I've done my part. I'm not going to hear from them. Until I did. 3 days later, an editor from the Washingtonian called me and said, Salma, come to my office. I want to talk to you about this story. I'm like, what's going on here? And what they said is that while this is your particular story, the story of a Pakistani American, it is very much the story of Washingtonians as well. There are people in this town from all over the world who have come here, who are raising children, who are building a life for their families, and who are blending traditions and trying to make it work. So while it's your specific story, it really has this universal appeal because many people can see themselves in that story. So it ended up, they said, elaborate, turn it into a feature. It was published, which was all very exciting. And my, parents were thrilled. My family bought all the issues on the newsstand. But really, after it was published, that's what changed my life. They included my email at the end of that piece. And I started getting emails, certainly from Pakistani Americans and from Muslims, saying, we don't get to see our stories in these pages. So it's wonderful that you shared your story. But even more so, I started getting emails from people of different backgrounds, from people of different faith traditions, saying, we don't have a Pakistani friend or a Muslim friend or classmate or colleague or neighbor. And now we feel like we do. It's through this story, what I'm thinking, and it is, in fact, a very ordinary story, but it is this story that helped people meet a Pakistani American, meet a Muslim where they wouldn't have otherwise. And that for me was sort of the aha moment of the power of our stories. In fact, there's something that I keep on my desk. One of the emails that I received, I'll just read you a few lines because it really is the raison d'etre for my storytelling, why I continue to share personal stories. So this was a woman in Ohio, who wrote this. I was struck with how similar you and your faith and values are to my family. I'm a Jewish woman who grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, but my grandparents and their families were from all over Europe. They too came to America when their respective countries had civil and political strife. Your struggles are identical to ours in terms of our wanting to pass on traditions, worrying about perceptions from the public, and the trials and tribulations of raising our children and grandchildren and passing on our core values, traditions, and faith. I realize that people from all over the world have more similarities than differences, and your writing brings that to light. I thought that was so beautiful, and it really captured the sentiment of so many messages that I received. And for me, that is the power of our story. That's the power of sharing our personal stories.
Wow, Selma, that is truly amazing that you just started off the bat with a feature in the Washingtonian, which I think is incredible. And also, it's funny because nowadays it seems like everybody's trying to be a social media influencer and striving to be extraordinary, but it's really that simple, relatable, those aspects of life that truly bring us together. So I wanted to ask you, because you started with doing so much to amplify that Pakistani American voice. In your view, what do you think is the most, or what are the most important stories from this community that you think need to be told today?
I think the most important stories are each of our stories. I think, each one of us has our own experiences, our own history, our own thoughts and ideas and um, perspectives. And I think those are the stories that need to be told. Um, that's how, just as this story about a young girl coming to America and trying to find her space in this country spoke to so many people, I think each of our stories will speak to people in the same way if we are honest and authentic and vulnerable, and just real. We really need to share in a way that connects us to each other. And I think that really is what stories do. They help us understand each other. I mean, people who wrote to me, didn't know a Pakistani or a Muslim American. And it was through this story that they felt they had a friend. Um, so I think those are the stories that need to be told, our ordinary, everyday stories, so people can see who we are, where we come from, what our values are, how we live our lives, how we raise our children, how we respect our elders. And through sharing those stories, they will understand our values and what's important to us. And and that's where I think the connection happens. People will relate to us, see themselves and their story, just like this Jewish elder woman did in my story. And that connection is so powerful. And it's not by saying, I come from Pakistan, it's a country geographically located here, it has so many million people, and da 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 da. Just reveal who we are through our actions, through our values, through our what we dream of, what we hope for, what we fear, what challenges we've gone through, because chances are that the reader or the person sitting next to you who you're sharing your story with will have very similar experiences. And that's where, that's the beginning of a friendship, the beginning of a relationship, the beginning of understanding. And once you have that foundation, then anything's possible.
Absolutely. And I just had the chance to talk to my grandmother's sister after 10 years. She probably barely remembers who I was from when I was a kid, but I sat down with her, had a whole list of questions because I wanted to ask her questions about the partition and just to see what she remembered. And so I would definitely encourage the audience to just sit down with a family member, just as you did with your parents, to share their story of immigrating here, because again, it's those ordinary stories that really connects us and strengthens those bonds, even if it's just within the family. Um, but Salma, one thing I wanted to talk about was that, if there's anything that I know about the Pakistani or like Muslim families, is that we each have within our families, maybe some stories that we might not want to air out because they might be a little bit sensitive or taboo. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, how do you approach those stories and your approach to storytelling when it comes to working within the Pakistani American community?
So, if you're a personal storyteller, then you have to share personal stories, and people can definitely tell when you are hiding something or not revealing something fully, and they're not going to connect with you. They're not going to relate to you if that's the case. And so, when I chose to share initially this personal story of coming to America, then I realized, I need to share the stories that are meaningful to me um, and that may be difficult for me to share and perhaps for my family to hear. But that's where I think the connection really deepens. And so I'll just share with you something personal that I'm sharing these days and that I shared previously as well, that I think a lot of Pakistani Americans, Muslim Americans may feel is a taboo subject. In fact, I had a hard time talking about it. So I am currently going through breast cancer treatment, and this is the second time that I've had breast cancer. So about 11 years ago, I got breast cancer. It was a shock to me and to my family and close community. Um, Never thought that, something like that would affect you. Um, and my family and close friends were so concerned about how I was doing. And it's difficult when you're going through a difficult health challenge to respond to every text and every phone call and every email. So I decided to write a series of letters that I would send out to family and friends. And they were personal letters to let people know how I was doing and what my treatment plan was and just what my thoughts were during that time. Um, and then I met the editor of a Muslim women's magazine, and we were at a meeting, and she approached me, and she kind of felt that something was not quite right. So I shared with her what I was going through at the time. I had just come back from radiation, um, and I was at this meeting, and so I shared with her, and I sent her one of the letters. And she said, Salma, is it okay if I share these personal letters with our readers through our magazine? And I, I, I thought about it because really, again, there was no intention of me going public with these letters, certainly not with private letters I was sharing with my family and close friends. But then she said that, women in particular, Muslim women, Pakistani women, they don't talk about this subject. Even the word breast is difficult for some women to say. Even for myself, I have to admit, if my father was in the room, I would feel a little shy to say breast cancer. I mean, it's a disease, it's an illness, but somehow there is this taboo around this particular, word and aspect of a woman's body. So I thought about it and I thought, if my sharing could help somebody talk about this issue, seek help if they fear they might have breast cancer, or just kind of um, sort of take away the taboo or the shame around this subject, then it would be worth it. And so these letters were published through their website, and I hope it helped women feel less shame or feel more open to at least seek information and guidance and professional help if they needed it. And right now, I have actually a newsletter that I write. It's called Humankind. And through it, I share personal stories, sometimes my own and sometimes that of other people. A lot of Pakistanis are featured in it. Many Muslims are featured. Again, because I want people to know who we are. And for me, it's by sharing these stories. And so when the breast cancer came back earlier this year, I thought, I can't be sharing other people's personal stories and not reveal what I'm going through. So this whole year, through my newsletter, I've been sharing this journey of getting a second diagnosis and treatment and just what I'm feeling. For example, when during the chemotherapy, when I lost all my hair, that newsletter is called What's Hair Got to Do with It? And I talk about how, all my life I've had this gorgeous, thick, wavy hair, the kind that aunties love, because it just kind of used to fall into place and I didn't have to do much to it. And then all of a sudden, I was getting a buzz cut in my terrace. So, it's a pretty shocking, very difficult experience. And I talk about it. And I think from the reactions I'm getting from people, it seems to be helping. And it's not about me, it's not about cancer, it's not about just what I'm going through. It really speaks to the challenges that people go through, right? I mean, this might be my particular experience, but we all have challenges and pressures and stresses and anxieties. And I think by sharing sharing one's experience, people can relate, people can see themselves in these stories and open up themselves. So it's been an amazing experience to hear the stories of other people. And the first time that I shared the news, I said in that newsletter that, you know, please don't feel compelled to write back. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me or say, you know, I'm really upset that you're going through this. But I did say that if you'd like to write back, then tell me how you get through challenging times, because the next few months are going to be really hard. And I just want to have sort of a reservoir of tools that I can count on, you know, things I can turn to, things that have helped you. And I wasn't expecting to hear many responses, but I got so many emails, such beautiful, thoughtful messages from people. And amazingly to me, it wasn't from my closest friends. I mean, it really was from people that I hardly knew, that maybe I had just met at a formal meeting or at a conference, or we had dinner together once. Um, and somehow they felt close enough through these stories to open up and share very personal, very intimate, very you know, thoughtful messages with a stranger. I mean, we hardly knew each other before this, but now we do. I mean, our relationship and our connection is so much deeper than it would ever have been. I mean, I may not have seen that person or connected with that person ever again, if not for, you know, my opening up and perhaps giving them the space and the opportunity and the permission to open up themselves and share, knowing that they were helping me by sharing, you know, their. So I started cutting and pasting these emails that I was getting, and it is over 100 pages long. I keep it close to me on my desk. I flip through these messages constantly. It brings me so much comfort and solace. I would take this with me to chemotherapy. It just, you know, I don't know how to tell you. It is what has gotten me through a really difficult year. It's people's love, their warmth, their heartfelt prayers, their just their feelings, you know, towards another person who they may not know very well, but they wanted to share something of themselves. And I think that's just so beautiful. And it's a story that brought that out. You know, again, it's the power of opening up and revealing something about yourself and realizing other people are kind of hankering for that too, perhaps even waiting for that opportunity to reveal themselves too.
Salma, thank you so much for sharing that story, because the first time you told me your story, it brought me to tears. And I think it's Brene Brown that often speaks about, you know, the power of vulnerability when it comes to building those meaningful connections. And, you know, I, I felt like, you know, I see a little part of me in you, in that you are so resilient. It's so obvious that you're compassionate and kind. When I reached out to you, you sent me your newsletter, and now I am one of your avid readers and would encourage the audience to sign up as well. Um, One thing I wanted to talk about was that, you know, when it comes to, you know, topics around family and intergenerational connection, um, I think that some stories are more acceptable than others, and you kind of referenced that with, you know, even the word breast being sensitive in front of your father. I recently sat down with my aunt and was trying to convince her to maybe go see a doctor or a therapist. And I think that might be seen in my generation more acceptable, but she was completely, not wanting to do that. And so, in terms of, building that intergenerational connection, how does that influence the stories that you share?
I think the more that we can open up, it's really hard for our parents, and certainly around these topics. Mental health, for example, is still considered so difficult for so many of our elders to talk about or to share if they're going through something. But I just feel that if we can do that, and it's perhaps easier for us, we're growing up in a much more open culture where people talk about these issues. The taboo for us is not the same as it is perhaps for our parents and their parents. So if we can share our stories around it and make it something that is common to talk about, I think it may help them. It certainly will help our children and those around us who hear our stories. I was asked to speak at this. There's an organization that deals with mental health issues in our community in particular. And they asked me to speak. And I do some volunteer work with the refugee community, and I think they were expecting me to talk about mental health in the refugee community. Instead, I shared my daughter's story with her permission. My daughter suffers from depression. And so in a room full of people, friends of mine and others, shared that, this is life, and this is a challenge that she has faced and will continue to face, and she's managing, and we're supporting her, and she has incredible professional help around her, and she's very comfortable with talking about it. And I certainly wouldn't have said anything if she didn't want me to, and I didn't go into details. That wasn't the point. It was simply to say that, yes, my daughter suffers from depression. And there was such a hush in that room. And people afterwards came up to me and hugged me and said, "Oh, you're so brave. You're so courageous." I'm like, really? I don't think so. I'm just talking about what goes on in our families. I'm sure I am not the only family where somebody is going through a mental health issue. I'm sure there are people in this room themselves or their children or their parents or their loved ones who face this challenge. I am sure of it. So by my sort of opening up, um, maybe it'll help somebody else open up. Maybe it'll help a parent speak to their child, or a parent, somebody in that room seek the help that they need. I don't know what the big deal is, seriously. Why this taboo about these subjects? I mean, we are human beings. We are all human beings. And it comes with the territory. We're going to have problems, and we're going to have anxieties. And some of us are going to have depression at some point in our lives, or some of us may be going through a mental health crisis or challenge, or whatever. And we need to get it, open the doors and the windows and talk about it. How else are we going to get through life? It is by sharing, it is by confiding, it is by being there for each other, it's by lifting each other up. I mean, I don't know, I just find so much strength and so much of my comfort and resilience, and the things people say, "Oh, you're so strong." Well, I'm strong because people lift me up. It's because I'm surrounded by this incredible family and community. uh, I'm not strong just as a single human being. How can we be? We are strengthened if we're there for each other. And I'll tell you, on the first day of my chemotherapy, I was so scared. I mean, first of all, it was such a shock that I needed chemotherapy. All the doctors were convinced that I'd have surgery and I'd have radiation and I'd be on this pill that I need to be on for 10 years, but that's it. I wouldn't need chemotherapy until they tested my tumor and it was aggressive enough that I needed chemotherapy. I was really shocked and scared and upset. And on the first day, it was 8 in the morning. I packed my things for the hospital and my husband was with me and I opened my front door. And at the bottom of our steps, there are 25 people, my cousins, my friends. They're holding banners which are hanging around my office. If you could see my office there, it says Salma's Tribe and You Can and Salma Power and Stay Strong, Salma. So there are all these people holding these banners, holding balloons, singing Lean on Me. Can you just imagine that? I mean, there I am, scared out of my mind, and I see this sight of love and just community and this embrace, you know. I wasn't scared anymore. And I took all these pictures and videos. And as I was sitting in that chemo chair that morning, I just looked at them. I'm like, I've got this because they've got me, you know? So I just think it's it's it will help you if you unburden, if you just open up a little bit, even just to people close to you. It doesn't have to be publicly, it doesn't have to be in writing, it doesn't have to be in a magazine. No, but do open up to people that you trust and know that they will understand and likely they're going through something similar or something that they can relate to. So, it is the whole it's the whole point of being human, you know. um, we go through things and we need to be there for each other to get through the hard stuff.
No, for sure. And Selma, as the eldest daughter, and as someone who grew up in a very turbulent household, sometimes it's hard being strong all the time. And so I really appreciated your advice on just asking people, what do you do when you're going through hard times? Because it really does signal to other people that you're open to getting help,
Mhm.
and just learning from them as well. And I know you showed that book of letters that you've received. Is that something that's personal, or any plans on publishing any of those stories or advice? Because I feel like all of us kind of
Yeah,
need that at times.
again, it was there was no intention. I mean, it seems my storytelling is all by or the books or the published pieces come out by accident. So this is all personal, written to me, and I certainly wouldn't share any of it with that if people weren't comfortable. But there is so much in there that I think all of us can benefit from. It almost feels selfish to keep it to myself. So and many people who read my newsletter, and especially these past few months, have been saying, I sure hope you're working on your next book, because I think the newsletters are speaking to people, and certainly what I'm receiving is something that is so something we can all really benefit from. So I think there is a way. I'm trying to think what would be the right way. I don't want to write a cancer journey. There are so many of those books. I want to share, with people's permission, the things that they've shared with me. And really, what I'd like to find out is why they shared what they shared. I mean, that to me is the story. It's what they've written, but also where is that coming from? What um, compelled them to write to a stranger, to take the time and think deeply and write so beautifully and share so meaningfully. Where is that coming from? That to me is a story I'd love to learn and share, in addition to all of the different wisdoms and life lessons and suggestions. I mean, it ranges from just amazing music to listen to and rom-coms to watch when things get really hard, to beautiful surahs and prayers and hymns and verses from different sacred texts, to some really poignant personal stories. And so, yeah, inshallah, I hope I can do justice to to this beauty that I've been gifted. And I hope I can use it to help other people. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. So fingers crossed on that one. I'm really hoping that you share some of that advice. And um, also, as someone who has had imposter syndrome and sometimes still does, to be honest with you, would love to hear some advice from you on, you know, other Pakistani American writers, or especially women who want to share their stories or advice, but might feel some societal, pressure to that might hold them back.
Uh, join the club of imposter syndrome folks. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't feel that way. And I guess my advice, from my own experience, is just start writing for yourself. I mean, that's what I did. I wanted to capture the story of my family coming to this country for myself and for my family, and just have it written down, it's recorded so that I would know the details, because, since then my father has passed. And had I not asked him when I did, I wouldn't know those nuggets, which are just so beautiful. So do it for yourself. I mean, don't think that if you'd like to get it published, absolutely, but start by writing about something that's important to you and that's meaningful for you, and keep it for yourself if that's feels comfortable. But if you'd like to share it and publish it, know that whatever is meaningful to you is meaningful to somebody else, for sure. So don't feel you have to be big and grand and write about, incredible things. It is our ordinariness that connects us to each other. It is not our extraordinariness. It is not the accolades and the awards and the achievements and the gold stars. Nobody wants to hear about that. That separates us. It is
Yeah.
just our thoughts, our feelings, our fears, our vulnerabilities, our hopes, our dreams, what we want for our life. That's what connects us. So I would say, just my biggest advice is just to start. And sometimes you need that extra nudge, as I did. And I signed up for a writing class, because I knew I wouldn't just sit down one day and write a personal story. So that might help some people. Just, look out for a class in your town or on Zoom, because that gives you some structure and discipline, and an assignment, a homework assignment, and it encourages you to write a little bit, and because the next class you're going to share and others are going to share, and then you form this community of writers. So that's also been helpful for me. Um,
Yeah.
and actually, I'd love to share one other thing, which ties into many of your questions: the intergenerational and capturing our stories, and also the accidental way things have happened with my own writing. So about a dozen years ago, during during the month of Ramadan, my kids were much younger then, and I wanted them to understand the essence of the month. It's such a special month beyond fasting. They weren't fasting each day, but still, that month holds such beauty, and I wanted them to understand what that was about doing good and being kind, and doing for your neighbors, and just being your best self, putting your A game forward. So that first year, a dozen years ago, we decided we would do one good deed each day, and to keep us on the straight and narrow, so that by day 3, we didn't forget about it, we would start a very simple blog, and just write a few sentences, about what we did. So, and it became 30 days, 30 deeds. And so the kids sometimes would bake Moon and Star cookies and take it to the neighbors, or we would serve a meal at the local homeless shelter, or my parents were visiting, so they would make their grandparents smile, which is a form of charity, as well. And so we just did these simple things, nothing to change the world, nothing that took too much time or planning, or so that it would derail this effort of 30 days. And we blogged about it, and I'm not very tech savvy then, and nor now, So it was a very simple exercise. There was no marketing plan. There was no, like, nothing behind it. Again, it was just to share with close family, neighbors, community. I just send the email out. The next year, we thought, okay, this was kind of fun. It was a nice family project. We decided to do it again. And the next year it became 30 days, 30 gratitudes. What are we grateful for? Small things, big things. Downton Abbey Marathon was one. Our new puppy Luna was another. So, and we'd write about it. The kids would write about it. We'd send it out. Somehow, very organically, the email kept getting passed neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, and eventually it found this international audience. I have no idea how. Not to say that it went viral, it didn't, but it spread. And I think the people who were meant to find it found it somehow. And it was Pakistanis and Muslims, but it was a lot of non-Muslims as well. And then I started getting feedback from them saying, I don't practice your faith tradition, but I look forward to the month of Ramadan because I know I'm going to be getting these amazing personal stories. I kept doing this for 10 years. And over COVID, it was the 10-year anniversary of this 30 days project. We did 30 traditions, 30 wisdoms from our elders, 30 recipes, all sorts of different things each year. And I thought on the 10-year anniversary, perhaps, we should do something to commemorate this milestone. But then I thought, all of these stories are on my website. Do people really want a book of these ordinary stories? Then I met this incredible woman. So a different hat that I wear is I help lead a nonprofit in my volunteer capacity. And many people in the community connect me to people who need some help, who need some support. So a friend of mine had connected me to this woman from Afghanistan. She was looking for a job. She was looking for a place to live. And so I was trying to help her with that. And as I got to know her, I found out that she is this incredible artist. So much so that the Smithsonian invited her from Kabul several years ago to have an exhibit of her illuminations and miniature paintings and calligraphy. So when I found that out, I'm like, I'm not going to find you a job in an Afghan restaurant. I'm going to, help you find something that can utilize your incredible talent. And that's where the light bulb went off again. That my stories, the 30 Days story and her art go so beautifully together. Sharing tradition, sharing art, sharing the beauty of our region. So again, it's kind of it just starts, and then you have no idea where one story will lead. And for me, it led to a book, which is called 30 Days Stories of Gratitude, Traditions, and Wisdom. And it's a collection of personal stories around these various themes. Includes the story of how I met my husband. That's in the gratitude section. Um, it has my favorite chapter is wisdoms from our elders. So wisdoms I've learned from my father and my mother and my in-laws, and various other people share their stories as well. And each of these books, I mean, just look at this cover. So the art was designed by Sohra Hosseini, and many of her pieces are in the book. So it just is really a beautiful book. Each one has been hand bound because I just feel our stories are such a treasure, right? And I want what contains our stories to feel precious, something that we would feel proud of, to keep and to pass on to our future generations. At the end, there are all these reactions from people, and perhaps I'll just read one or two just to give you an idea again of the power of our stories. So your blog gives me hope in the world. It creates a safe space for positive narratives about extraordinary Muslims who have character, vision, social impact, compassion, heart, intellect, and curiosity. You give me hope as a Jewish woman to know that there can be faith, tradition, and difference, yet shared values across cultural boundaries. We need more Salma stories to heal and reflect and to overcome isms. Another person wrote, I wanted you to know that your writing has been a blessing to me. As a Christian, I don't have regular contact with the Muslim community. Your stories, therefore, have become important counterpoints to the stories that so frequently are in the news. You've helped to reinforce the idea for me that it's imperative to separate the stories of violence from the stories and lives of peaceful Muslims who make up the majority of the Muslim communities around the world. With every example of Muslim life to be revered, not feared, non-Muslims can come a step closer to understanding the beauty of the Muslim faith. So, these are such ordinary stories of the things that my kids, the things they're grateful for, and the recipes that we make during Ramzan. But there's so much more than that. And I think that's one of the main things that I'd love to communicate to the listeners, and also to young people and to aspiring writers, that you may think your story is ordinary, but the impact that it has on a person you'll never know, and the ripple effect that it may have, you may never understand. So it's so important to value your story. I think it's the most important legacy that we can leave is each one of us is mortal, right? We are going to not be here one day, but it's our stories that endure. They are going to live on. So really revel in that, and share the beauty of your story, and know that you have stories to tell. I think that's another piece of maybe advice that I can share, is that so many people come up to me and say, oh, but my life is kind of dull. I haven't done anything. No, your life isn't dull, and you have incredible stories to share. So feel proud of who you are, where you come from, the things you value, the experiences you've had, and share that.
Salma, what a beautiful practice, especially during such a meaningful time like Ramadan. If you could humor us, I would love to hear, any moments of gratitude that stood out to you during your journey of compiling that book.
Moments of gratitude.
Yes.
Well, the whole process of putting the book together, of all the stories that are in this book, of meeting this incredible artist by chance, and her artwork that graces this book. And at the end of this book, there's an envelope with these postcards, which has they have Sukhra's art on them. And the idea is just write a note to someone you'd like to get to know. Share something about yourself. And the whole purpose of this book, while I hope you enjoy the stories in it, it really is to encourage you and your family to think about your own stories. What are you grateful for? What are the traditions that you value? What are the wisdoms from your elders that guide your life? I just want this to be the starting point, to really get you thinking about your own stories and sharing them, perhaps writing them, but definitely feeling proud of them, and really, letting them sustain you and nourish you and guide you. And it happens over and over again. Like my most favorite chapter in this book, in fact, my next book, this is going to be a trilogy. So this is 30 Days, Stories of Gratitude, Traditions, and Wisdom. The next year, I did a 30 days journal, which has 30 questions, so that each day of the month of Ramadan, or any 30 days, you answer one question and you have your own book of personal stories. And the next one is going to be Wisdoms from Our Elders, which is one chapter in this book. And I think our wisdoms from our elders, it's just so important to capture and to record and to understand. They've lived such rich and difficult lives, and there's so much that we can take away from there and learn and pass on to our own children, and so on. So my next book will be about that. And so it really, this is a process. It's not the stories themselves. I mean, they're fine, they're fun, they're personal, I hope people enjoy them, but that's not the point. The point is, read the book and share your own stories. Think about your own stories. Have, around the dinner table, ask your elders and your children to share their stories. What traditions matter to them? What are they grateful for? It's really an exercise to encourage story sharing. And so I remember once I was launching this book in Granada, in Spain, and I read a couple of stories from the book. And one of my favorites is a wisdom from my father who has passed away. I mean, he was the kindest man. And I share this story about how when there was somebody's birthday being celebrated at his office, and they'd bring the sheet cake, right? And he loved cake, and he knew that I did too. So he'd get his piece of cake, and I mean, I'm sure he would have loved to just enjoy it right then and there, but he'd wrap his piece of cake in a napkin and bring it home in his briefcase and give it to me at the end of the day. And his joy was seeing me enjoy that piece of cake, right? There was nothing delicious about that sheet cake, but it was just the process that, you know, he knew that I would savor it. And that was so much more meaningful to him than him enjoying it at the moment. So it's not really a wisdom, but it's how he lived his life and how he did for others. And so I share that story. And I was sharing it in this gathering in Granada, and there was a woman in the back of the room. And I asked people, would you like to share something about, your parents, or a wisdom or a lesson or an experience that stays with you? And so this woman raised her hand, and she shared the most beautiful story of it going to Hajj or perhaps Umrah with her father, and just this. I won't share it here, but it's such a poignant story. And she was crying, and I was crying, and we all said prayers for her father and my father. I mean, it just sharing our stories brings us closer together. It makes the world a little bit smaller, a whole lot kinder and gentler. And look at the time we're living in. There is so much division, and there's so much othering, and there's so much tearing us apart, or trying to. I just want to bring us closer together, and it's by sharing these stories that I think, because in the end, we may be from different countries and traditions and political beliefs and religious identities, but we are all human. We're all human beings, and that's what connects us, and that's what we need to focus on, and that's what's going to get us through.
And Selma, just listening to this book, I'm like, how do I get my hands on this book? Because I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this and probably craving cake and wanting to savor, a piece of your book as well. So can you tell us a little bit about how we might be able to both get your book and then also sign up to your newsletter as well?
Sure. So as I was saying earlier, uh, each of my books is handmade. They're hand bound, and so they have some unique design features and different things. And it's because I feel our stories are so precious that I want whatever contains our stories to feel like a treasure, to feel like something we will pass on, one generation to the next. So the book is a limited edition. I have some copies left, and it's available through my website, which is salmahasanali.com. And my newsletter is called Humankind, and you can sign up on my website as well. And there's lots of writing, and my blog, and other things. I have a storytelling consulting practice, so I help individuals if they want to capture their own story or need some help writing it, or I write it for them. I help businesses. I do storytelling workshops. I work with nonprofits. So, it's just so much more compelling. Whatever it is you're trying to do, sell, advocate for, record, it's so much more compelling through a personal story than anything else. So that's what I try and do through my professional practice. And there's information about that on my website as well.
Again, Selma, I just want to thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your story. I think that, as a kid that grew up post 9/11, like stories of Pakistanis have, mainly look like terrorists. And I think that your ability to, not only just story tell, but to connect people, not just within the Pakistani American community, but the greater, American community, I think is so meaningful, especially because people don't know how beautiful our food is, our music is, our stories of passion are. And I think that you really capture the essence of how beautiful our stories are. And so, again, want to thank you so much for joining. And to anybody listening, we will catch you next time with our next podcast. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.